by being creators of our own lives, we will constantly have new desires, wants, and needs. The second one of them is fulfilled, we'll move on to the next. There's always more. There's always more ways that we can grow and develop. There's always more goals and dreams that we have. So we have to learn to find that satisfaction, that wholeness, that happiness in the process, or we'll never have it at the destination, because there is no destination. Hello, my friends. Welcome to It's All Magic. I am your guide, your host, and your friend, Devin Hine. And here we'll be discussing how to make your life truly feel like magic. I believe that our very existence on Earth is nothing less than a miracle, and that we all have so much potential to learn, to grow, to experience, and to create during our short time here. It is both my passion and my pleasure to walk this path of life optimization by your side, where we'll discuss topics like passion, purpose, intuition, manifestation, physical well-being, and much, much more. I'm a yoga teacher, a meditation and breathwork facilitator, and a national board certified health and wellness coach. But more importantly, I am an eternal optimist, a lover of life, and a forever student. It is my hope that with each and every episode, you too will finally start to believe it really is all magic after all. Ready to dive in? Let's do it. Hello, my friends, and welcome back to another amazing episode of It's All Magic. I am coming to you solo today after a couple weeks of really amazing interviews. A couple weeks ago, I had some of my family members on the show, and then last week we had Dr. Shannon Smith, who was a pediatrician who decided to pivot her life and career to become a life coach and then a leadership strategist. So I have picked the brains of many amazing people, and I am continuing to do so. I have a ton of really fascinating and fun interviews lined up for January and February. But I thought for today, I would just sit down and speak from my heart again. Not that I haven't during the interviews, but when I sit down solo and I just get to share directly from my heart and share anything that's been on my mind, it's really liberating for me. And I've also heard from you all that it's usually pretty relatable, whatever I end up sharing. So that is my hope and goal for today. I have quite a few thoughts that I have just been pondering over the last couple of weeks, and a few things that have been popping up in my life kind of a weird amount of times. And anytime something pops up more than once, I usually take it as a sign that it is some sort of message, or even if it's not a message for me, maybe it's a message for one of you. So I will be sharing some of those repeating themes with you today, and hopefully you will all get something from it. I know that I really have, just from really taking a step back and thinking about these messages that I feel like I have been sent. So before we dive into a little story time today and all of the lessons and messages that I've been sent, I want to invite us to all take some deep breaths together. So the breathing exercise that I want us to do today is called the 4-7-8 breath. I believe we've done it on the show before, but if you're either a new listener or if we in fact have not done this breathing practice on the show before, I will give you a brief explanation. So for the 4-7-8 breath, we'll breathe in through the nose for a count of 4, hold our breath at the top for a count of 7, and then we're going to slowly exhale through the mouth as if you're blowing through a straw. So you're going to create kind of an O shape with your mouth for a count of 8. As I've said 5 million times on this podcast before, anytime we exhale longer than we inhale, we help to calm our nervous system. So the breathing is going to be super simple, but also extremely effective. This is a breathing technique that has revolutionized the world of breathwork, and it's been made very popular by Dr. Andrew Weil. I believe it's actually his breathing technique. He's a functional medicine doctor, integrative medicine doctor, and he's really inspirational. So let's do 5 rounds today. I was going to do 3, but I feel like I could personally use 5. And so maybe I'm not alone in that. So whenever you are ready, I want you to gently close your eyes if you're able. If you are operating a moving vehicle, please do not. You can get yourself comfortable if you have the opportunity to sit down. And before we even take our breaths, I'm just going to give you 1 second of silence here. I just want you to sit here for a moment. Creating some intention around being here. Whether you're walking, doing dishes, sitting, it doesn't matter. But just giving yourself truly 5 seconds to sit in silence. Okay, that was enough silence. So let's start by just taking 1 normal deep breath together. So breathing in through the nose, filling up the lungs completely all the way. Open mouth, just let this one go. Beautiful. Seal the lips. Inhale through the nose for 4, 3, 2, 1. Hold for 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Slow exhale through the mouth, like emptying, 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 trying to elongate the exhale longer than the inhale. Beautiful. And again, inhale. Hold. Exhale. And inhale again. Hold. And exhale. Beautiful. 2 more. Inhale through the nose. Hold. Exhale through the mouth. And final one, make it the fullest yet. Inhale through the nose. Hold. Slow exhale through the mouth. Beautiful. Breathing in through the nose. And breathing out through the nose. Coming back to a normal breathing pattern. And fluttering open your eyelids if you got the chance to close them. Oh, oy vey, as my people say. I could now take a nap. But I hope you feel a little bit more peace, a little bit more calm and grounded and balanced. That's typically how breathwork makes me feel. Today, as I'm recording, is actually a new moon in Capricorn. It is currently January 11th as I'm sitting down for this. And so this morning, I woke up super early. I recently got back to California from West Virginia. And because I'm super jet lagged, I've been waking up at 5 a.m. So I woke up super early and I did a ton of breath work, meditation, journaling, tarot card pulls. I really sat with myself and tried to set some intentions for the month ahead. The new moon is a really potent time for setting intentions and getting clear on what you want to manifest. And then, as I've also mentioned in past episodes, the full moon is actually the closing of a chapter. It's where you reflect on everything that has been, everything that has come to fruition. And then 2 weeks after that, when the next new moon comes, you set more intentions. So anyway, when I did my breath work this morning, I did some activating practices that I actually haven't shared on the podcast yet. I feel that when people tune into a podcast, at least for me personally, I'm typically on a walk or doing my makeup or making myself dinner. And so it's not always the best time to activate the sympathetic nervous system. But you should know that there are times when that is actually beneficial. In fact, a few weeks ago, I was feeling a little under the weather. I had a bit of a cold, and I did some really intense activating practices. Because when you trigger that sympathetic nervous system, it can actually help to turn on your immune system and kind of get rid of all that gunk. So I did a few detoxification practices, something called a shot karma, which is a purification technique. And so there are times when that is beneficial, but I feel that through this podcast, those calming, slowing, grounding practices tend to feel really good. So if you ever want an activating practice, do let me know, but I am more than happy to continue guiding these 3 to 5 calming breaths each week. I know it's always a really great time for me to check in, and I know I'm not alone in that. So with that behind us, I want to dive into some of the thoughts that I have been pondering for the last few weeks. The biggest one, honestly, is a message that I have seen pop up so many times in the last even few days that I started to feel like, okay, I'm meant to share this. I'm sure I'm not the only one that is going to resonate with this message. I'm sure there are people out there that need to hear this as much as I do. So that message is trust the timing of the universe. Trust the process. It started because I saw one of my favorite breathwork facilitators, Hella Weston. She had posted on her Instagram talking about how people look at her success and they think that it was this overnight phenomenon, that she just woke up one day and life was easeful. She was living her purpose. She was being paid the big bucks for living her purpose. And she said that is simply not the case. That for all of us, especially the ones that you look at and they have such successful lives, the kinds of lives that we're all looking to manifest, it never happens overnight, except for maybe a few oddball cases. But she said it's all about those small steps that you take every single day. And it reminded me of one of my favorite manifestation law of attraction books that I've actually talked about on the show before, Ask and It Is Given by Esther and Jerry Hicks. In that book, they had this really practical way of explaining manifestation. And I remember when I was reading the book in bed one night, I read this line and I turned over to Cal and I was like, oh, Cal, you're going to love this. Because Cal is a very practical guy and he loves manifestation and law of attraction, but he really appreciates those down-to-earth ways of defining them and thinking about these concepts. So what the book shared is that if you think about what you want to manifest, or let's just speak in non-spiritual terms for a second, if you think about your dream, your goal as your end destination, and you essentially turn yourself in the right direction of that destination, and you put one foot in front of the other, continuing to go in that direction of your destination, there is simply no way that you will not eventually get to that destination. I repeat, if you turn yourself in the right direction of your destination, you keep taking small steps in the direction of your destination, there's no way you won't get to that point. And so that is a really incredibly practical and grounded way of seeing manifestation, but it's also just a great way at looking at our lives. We all have so many dreams and goals and priorities and values, sometimes too many at once. They tend to be competing in the modern world. We all have so many priorities all the time. But especially for the important ones, if we continue to take small steps in that direction, and then we just trust the timing, trust the process, we will eventually get there, even if it doesn't look the way we thought it would. In fact, it typically doesn't. I was actually listening to a good friend of mine's podcast the other day, and this was the second time that I heard about this message. This is where I started feeling like, okay, this is clearly the message that I meant to share. So this friend of mine, her name is Jenna Monaco Schaefer, and she has this really awesome mental health podcast called Spark Intention. I highly recommend it. And in this episode, she was talking about trusting the timing of the universe and kind of surrendering that anxious waiting. You know, we've all been there where you're kind of in that limbo period, you're putting in the work, you're not seeing the progress, and you start feeling anxious about not being where you want to be yet. And she said, listen to this episode because I will share with you, we've all been there, and there's a way to bypass that anxiety, which is exactly what I'm sharing with you all today. And the way that she recommends bypassing that anxiety is simply trusting in the process and trusting the timing. So the story she shared from her own life that I found so compelling that I wanted to share it with you all today was the story of when her and her partner Chris moved into this beautiful house with a redwood in the yard. And the reason why the redwood is important is for a couple of reasons. First of all, Jenna has always had this deep connection to redwoods. She says that they are her church. They are essentially her greatest spiritual teacher. They are her sanctuary. And so when they found this house and they saw that there was this massive redwood in the yard, they both knew this is the house. So the redwood was really important to them. But you'll see in this story, the redwood almost becomes the villain. Bum bum. So they move into the house, and she said they had so many things they needed to renovate. Mainly they had to work within the main house, but there was also kind of these odd 2 rooms that were connected to the garage, one of those detached garages. And the 2 rooms were weirdly connected to that, and they smelled funky. They were old. They were decrepit. They were just terrible. But when they moved in, Jenna had this vision of, that's going to be my studio. I'm going to paint there. I'm going to have clients over there. I can record my podcast there. And so this was her vision, her dream. She was so excited to get started. And even though they needed to be very tactful and smart about how they spent their budgeted money and where they were really going to put their focus for the renovation, whether it was the main house or the studio, she said, Chris, I really, really want to work on the studio first. Can we get started on that? And so they kind of put the main house renovations on pause. And in order to get started on the studio, the first thing they had to do was actually connect these 2 rooms by inserting this roof beam that would connect the infrastructure between the 2 rooms. And so they spent $5,000 on this beam that would finally connect the rooms. And, you know, it was truly the first thing they did. Like, she could not wait. She was feeling very impatient about it. So they get the beam, they connect the rooms, and then guess what happened? I'll give you a hint. It has to do with the redwood. So that redwood had a couple different, let's call them sprouts at the top of the tree, kind of 2 little sprigs, we could say. And one of them, I'm saying little, but they were not little. This is a redwood that we're talking about. It's a massive tree. One of them fell off of the tree and fell directly onto this new beam that was holding the 2 rooms together. Devastating. And so guess what? She, of course, was thinking, oh my gosh, what have I done? I rushed the process. I didn't trust in the universe. I started on this studio before it was really time for me to do so. And look what happened. But then guess what happened? Their insurance company actually paid for the damage done by the tree. They, for some reason, paid for them to have this fence put in that they really had needed to even budget for, and then they didn't even have to use their own money. And get this, the insurance company paid for them to get this kind of singular roof line that would connect the 2 rooms. And when they did that, that beam that they spent $5,000 on became redundant. It was completely unnecessary because that new roof line was stronger than the beam. It did the job perfectly, and they really had wanted to put windows into this studio space. And for whatever reason, I don't really have the visual clear on this one, but when they put the beam in, it wouldn't have allowed for them to put in windows the way they wanted to. So when that new roof line was set up, they actually then had the space to do the dream windows. And then it gets even weirder, you guys. So her and her partner Chris start looking for windows, and they were appalled at how expensive they were. Just then, she gets a call from her aunt and uncle who say, hey, we have a couple windows that we're not going to use. We were going to use them for a renovation, and now we're not anymore. Could you and Chris use them? She's like, are you kidding me? And so they used the aunt and uncle's windows, put them into the studio space, and everything was underway for her dream vision studio. And so her point in telling this amazing story is that you just have to trust the process. Because at first, when the tree fell and they had already spent that $5,000 on the beam, she was so disappointed. But because of her years of mental health work and spiritual work and learning to surrender to the universe, she knew that everything would be okay. She still had that human emotion of, oh my gosh, what have I done? What a waste of money. But she knew she just had to wait it out. And what's also crazy, you guys, something I hadn't mentioned, is after they had put that expensive beam into the studio, because they had used so much of their budget for the studio and they had so much to do in the main house still, they had to pause on the studio renovation and use some of their budget for the main house. And so when the redwood then fell on the studio, she said, thank goodness that we did not continue the renovation in the studio. It would have been such a waste of money because there was so much damage. And so the point of the story is that we really don't know what is being orchestrated as things are happening. In Judaism, which is the religion of my mother and my mother's people, and therefore me, because it is a matrilineal lineage, meaning that it goes through the mother's side. I have studied Judaism a little bit, especially in college, and one of my favorite concepts is that God is working on things all the time. And it's just that it's not always revealed to us. So a very common prayer or affirmation that Jews like to give to one another is, may you have revealed blessings this year. And they say revealed because it's the belief that there are always blessings in your life. There are always good things happening to you in your life, but we don't always see it that way. So Jenna could have seen that tree falling as a terrible, terrible evil. And yet, because that tree fell, the insurance company paid for this brand new roof, a new fence, and therefore, in a way, these windows, because the roof allowed for these windows to be installed. So we really never know what's going on behind the scenes. Whoever is orchestrating or puppeteering this thing called life, we can't always see what is happening in the process. And on that note, I wanted to share this quick story meant to show this exact point, that we don't always know what is good and what is bad and what will come of these things. So the story goes like this. There was once a farmer who owned a horse and had a son. One day, his horse ran away. The neighbors came to express their concern. Oh, that's too bad. How are you going to work the fields now? The farmer replied, good thing, bad thing, who knows? In a few days, his horse came back and brought another horse with her. Now the neighbors were glad. Oh, how lucky! Now you can do twice as much work as before. The farmer replied, good thing, bad thing, who knows? The next day, the farmer's son fell off of the new horse and broke his leg. The neighbors were concerned again. Now that he's incapacitated, he can't help you around. That's too bad. The farmer replied, good thing, bad thing, who knows? Soon, the news came that a war broke out, and all the young men were required to join the army. The villagers were sad because they knew that many of the young men would never return. The farmer's son, however, could not be drafted because of his broken leg. His neighbors were envious. How lucky! You get to keep your only son, the farmer replied. Good thing, bad thing, who knows? So again, I rest my case. We have to trust in the process. We have to trust the universe. And I know that things don't always work out the way we want them to. It's not that good things always happen in this world, and I won't pretend that they do. But if we can learn to surrender, to hold a little less tightly to those expectations that we have, it makes the pain of those negative events so much less painful. It really is about our expectations after all. For example, on this podcast journey that I'm on, if I defined my success by numbers alone, by the number of downloads on the podcast app or the number of likes, comments, views on my YouTube channel, then I would not necessarily feel fulfilled because there's never enough to feel fulfilled. And the number that I would be aiming for, hoping for, would constantly shift. As I get more subscribers or more listeners, then I would consistently want more and more and more. It would never be enough. And even for those of you that don't work within the realm of social media, you have your own career, your own sense of finding purpose and meaning. We all have those expectations, those hopes, those dreams, the things that we think will make us feel happy, the things we think will make us feel fulfilled, satisfied, whole, perfect, beautiful, healthy, skinny. And it's never that thing that makes us feel that way. We have to learn to feel those things during the journey, during the process. And then when we get to that place, we are going to want something new. Even in that manifestation book that I mentioned earlier, Ask and It Is Given, they share that idea that we as human beings are natural creators. And what it means to be a creator is that we constantly want to create something new. And when I say create, it doesn't necessarily mean that we are all artists, painters. When I say create, I mean we are creators of our own lives. And by being creators of our own lives, we will constantly have new desires, wants, and needs. The second one of them is fulfilled, we'll move on to the next. Even within psychology, there's that idea of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And once you fulfill one level of your needs, you move up. So the base of the pyramid in Maslow's hierarchy of needs has to do with shelter, food, water, basic survival needs. And as you move up that pyramid or that spectrum, you finally get to the very tippy top of the pyramid, which is self-actualization. So we can just think of that as living up to our potential, personal development, growing into who we know we can be. But I honestly don't think the pyramid ends there, because how could we ever be fully self-actualized? How could we ever be fully enlightened? There's always more. There's always more ways that we can grow and develop. There's always more goals and dreams that we have. So we have to learn to find that satisfaction, that wholeness, that happiness in the process, or we'll never have it at the destination, because there is no destination. And so I share that with optimism and joy in my heart, not as a negative message. I share that because it's honestly freeing to know that there is no destination, that the destination is every day of your life. Our entire lifespan is the journey. It is the process. There's actually this poem that I love that you should definitely look up called The Dash. And in the poem, it talks about how on a gravestone, it usually has the date you were born and the date that you died. And the whole point of the poem is that we focus so much on especially that last date, the date that they died. And yet really, that person was all about the dash in between. That was where they had their mark. That was where they lived their adventures. That's where they laughed wholeheartedly. And so it asks you in the poem, how do you want to spend your dash? And within that dash, my friends, it's not that we're even judging them by the milestones. When we think about someone's dash, think about the ways that someone has best served us. It's never in those massive milestones, the awards they got, the recognition they may have received for doing something. It's usually when we had a tough day and they sat down with us on the couch to cheer us up. It's those small moments of connection with one another and just enjoying the process, enjoying the dash that makes a life worth living. My mom even shared with me this post the other day that said, I want you to name 5 Nobel Peace Prize winners. Okay, so once you do that, then I want you to name 10 Grammys winners. And then I want you to name 10 Emmys winners. And it goes on. And the point essentially was we often can't name those people because those are not the things that end up sticking with us. Those are not the things that we remember. There are always people outstanding in their field. There always will be, there always has been. But again, it's those moments of connection that really matter. So I digress. That is a little bit off topic, but I think it's all so related. Everything in life is interrelated. One last point I wanted to make on this topic about trusting in the process and trusting in the timing of the universe. I wanted to give 2 small examples just to further illustrate this point. So one example of needing to trust in the universe and that everything will unfold as it should is this podcast. So when I began the podcast, I had the dream of doing both solo episodes and interviews with people that inspire me and would therefore inspire you. When I got started, I began doing only solo episodes. And the reason is because when I finally got started, I didn't even have the desire to interview someone. And the reason why is because I didn't have the time or creative energy. When I started this podcast, as I've shared before, I had my 9-to-5 tech corporate job, and I would work on the podcast every day after work and then all day, every day on the weekends. And so with that being my life, I was more or less in survival mode. I was still thrilled to share lessons and messages on the podcast, but I did not have it in me. I didn't have the time or the energy to reach out to people and get them on the podcast. And late November, I started getting a little worried. I said, I'm really enjoying this podcast process, but I don't know if I can do just solo episodes forever. I don't know if people will get bored of that. What if I run out of things to say? I thought I wanted to do interviews, but I haven't had the desire to do interviews. What has gone wrong? And I just had to come back to this message of just wait and see. And then guess what? I ended my job in December, and already by early January, I not only had the desire to start doing interviews, but I actually am booked out through January, February, and the first couple weeks of March with interviews. So I don't even know how that happened, but it's as if the second I had some of my time and my life force, my energy and vitality back, I suddenly had that dream, that vision reignited. It actually excited me again. And so I went for it and I started reaching out to people and scheduling interviews, and I've already started having interviews. And so the point is that when we just surrender, relax, let the process unfold, let the journey happen, we often realize that, it was just on its own timeline. It had to happen when it had to happen and not a minute too soon. The same is true for my mom. Over the winter break that we had recently together, she was starting to get a little bit stressed about the topic, the theme for her next Women Warrior Summit. Last October, she held the inaugural Women Warrior Summit, where she had over 750 women come to her summit, and there were keynote speakers and panelists and breakout sessions, and it was so educational and informative and inspirational. It was amazing. And she's already starting to plan for the second one next year. But over the break, she thought, oh my gosh, the first one went so well and I was so passionate about that topic. How will I ever think of another one that will match that? And so she actually asked me if I could do a tarot card reading for her, which is very unlike my mom. She's open to all of this stuff, but this is definitely not her world. And so I was thrilled when she asked to do a tarot card reading. And when I did the reading for her, she asked that exact question of, how am I going to figure out what my next topic is for the Women Warrior Summit? And the card that she pulled, you have to wait and be patient. It is coming to you very soon. And she just knew in her heart that that was exactly the message she needed. It's like she remembered that that was true, and she had just gotten caught up in her thoughts and kind of the anxious rat brain constantly going. And so after that, she took a step back. And I kid you not, guys, a week after that reading, she found the topic very organically. It was through kind of a series of conversations. She was talking to her sister one day. They both ended up talking about this topic that they had both been pondering for weeks. The second she just let go of the expectation, the need to have the topic right here, right now, when I want it, it came to her. So really, the whole point of this message today is to surrender a little bit, to trust in the process, and remember that the world works in mysterious ways. I also love the quote that says, things happen for you, not to you. And even in that story, my friend Jenna's story of the redwood tree falling on her precious studio, she could have seen that as this terrible thing has happened to me. And then very quickly, when that insurance company money kicked in, she realized that it had happened for her. And the more we see things happening for us as opposed to us, even if we don't know if it's a positive thing objectively yet, even if we feel that it's difficult or challenging or an obstacle in our path, just tell yourself it is for you, and the meaning behind it, the reason behind it will soon be revealed. It will all make sense. After all, that's why hindsight is 2020. We can all easily look back and connect the dots and remember how the journey was unfolding exactly as it was meant to. And yet, even when we know that, when we are in the thick of it, we have amnesia. We forget. So let this be your reminder to remember again, to remember that it's all unfolding as it's meant to, on the exact timeline that it should be unfolding on. So I ask you to round out this episode, where in your life are you pushing? Where are you forcing? Where are you shoulding on yourself, saying, I should do this, I shouldn't be single now, I should have more followers on my podcast? Where are you doing that? Where are you trying so hard? Where are you efforting and forcing and pushing, especially when it's against the grain and something about it feels like it's not meant to happen right now? If you can think of what that situation is in your life, I want you to relax a little bit. I want you to hold it a little less tightly, hold it lightly, let go of those expectations, or really ask yourself, why do you have expectations around that thing? When you think about getting that thing or hitting that milestone or being that version of yourself you want to be, is it because you think you'll be happier? Is it because you think you will feel more fulfilled or satisfied? What is that emotion that you're actually craving? And then how can you feel that today so that you already start to feel whole without that thing? And then by feeling whole without that thing, you will start to surrender. And by surrendering, you will soon have that thing. So it really is this crazy cycle and journey. I feel like this whole lesson of life, I've often heard life referred to as Earth School, but I feel like one of the biggest lessons is that the second you stop trying so hard or caring so much about something where you are forcing it and pushing it and trying so hard, the second you surrender, it suddenly happens. It's just like when I was younger and I would date some guys here or there, and there was never the one. And my mom would always say, Dev, you're only going to find someone when you stop wanting someone, when you stop trying so hard. And I kid you not, it worked like a charm, because I eventually got to the point where I said, screw this. And I just poured all my time and energy into my studies and personal development. I got really into astrology and tarot and nutrition and wellness, all of that. I poured my time and energy into my friendships, my community, the organizations I was a part of. And next thing you know, Cal and I fell in love, and we had that whole love story. So I will wrap up with that, but truly let this be a reminder from my heart to yours that we can all soften a little bit. Where can you be a little bit gentler in your life? Where can you be a little bit softer? And most importantly, where can you let go and surrender? And remember to trust in the universe. The universe has your back, my friend. I promise you. Whether it is revealed or not, it shall be revealed in time. Okay. Felt good to get that off my chest. I hope that in some way resonated with you or gave you a sense of inspiration. I really just want this podcast to be a place where you can come and feel a little bit lighter by the end. Whether that lightness means that you're a little bit more compassionate with yourself, or you're feeling energized, inspired, maybe a little bit of joy even, optimism, idealism. That is what I want this podcast to be. If you enjoyed today's episode, please rate and review on the Apple Podcast app or on the Spotify app. Subscribe to my YouTube channel, Devin Rochelle Hine. And most importantly, because we are building a community of like-minded souls here, please share this with a family member or friend that you feel like could really hear these words right now. By sharing this episode, you too will be sharing this reminder of surrendering and letting go with a loved one. And we really all need to be reminded of that all the time. Okay. I will wrap up here. I'm going to close out for this week. But as always, I already cannot wait to see you again next week. All right, my friends. Bye for now.